Nije nova vizura da je tkivo našeg svijeta satkano od vibracija. Svaki dijelić tog svijeta titra na nekoj svojoj frekvenciji, te je više ili manje ugođen sa ostalim titrajima. Takav pristup temelje mnogih metoda koje možemo nazvati zvukoterapija, jer je zvuk vibracija koju najzornije doživljavamo. A sretna je okolnost što se vibracije zvuka mogu proizvoditi na puno lako zamislivih načina. Raznovrsni instrumenti pratili su čovjeka kroz cijelu njegovu povijest, a u novije doba mnoga su stara znanja dobila svoju znanstvenu i praktičnu potvrdu. Na institutu boja zvuka u Engleskoj time se bavi Anthony Nec, a povremeno se time bavimo i ovdje, na Rubu Znanosti. Dobro večer. Anthony Nec, ravnatelj je instituta Color of Sound, u prijevodu boja zvuka iz Engleske, koji se bavi učincima zvuka na ravnotežu ljudskog tijela i zapravo ljudskog bića u cijelini. Dobro večer.
Good evening, thanks for having me tonight.
Čime se bavi institut Color of Sound i na čemu se zapravo temelji zvukoterapija?
Well, the Color of Sound Institute, we're researching, developing, and then training and teaching people around the world in how to work with sounds for healing, for awakening, and for transformation. So a large part of what we do is that we work with a range of instruments as well as a background theory about how healing, how therapy works, and so that we can apply this mostly in one-to-one situations with people for personal individual therapy. It can also be applied for groups of people as well, so that we can work in groups alongside the individual patients that we see as well.
Dobro, tijekom emisije čućemo i nekoliko primjera i istraživanja znanstvenih koja zapravo daju temelj zvukoterapiji. Ali generalno govoreći, koji je u stvari temelj zvukoterapije? Ako radi, zbog čega ona radi, na kakvim pretpostavkama se temelji?
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to distinguish between music therapy and sound therapy. Okay, so music therapy uses the principles of music, which would typically involve things like rhythm, melody, tempo, and so on, and would often involve working, if you're going to work one-to-one with somebody, you would work to engage the client in a process of working with instruments or working with their voice and so on. When we come to working with sound therapy, and I would say music is part of it, but sound therapy in a way is a little bit different, because what we're talking about there is working much more with the process of working with tones, with the quality of tone, with the quality of the note, with the quality of the frequency, which doesn't have any structure. Okay, so for example, if I was to ask you just now to think about your own breathing, your own body, when I do this in a minute, and then I'll check in with you at the end to see just what an effect it has. I'm just going to use my voice to do that, okay? So if you just start to become aware of your breathing, all right? And if I go, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, what do you notice?
Pa u ovom trenutku malo ste me zatekli.
Yeah, because probably...
Pitao sam se što ovaj čovjek sad tu pjeva.
Yeah. Because probably what happens for a lot of people when that occurs is that they hold their breath, because what they're expecting is the do again. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Točno, da.
Okay, so there's a structure, there's an expectation in there. And so often what happens is that when people listen to music, they start to analyze the music. They start to think about what's going to happen next, especially if you're a musician or you're sensitive or you listen to music a lot. And in that anticipation, in that analysis, you can't really relax properly. Okay? And so when you hold your breath like that, you're expecting it. But if you can move out of that domain of working with music and just working with sounds, working with simple instruments, working with repetition, removing yourself from the structure of music, then that's when the body can completely relax. Then we're not anticipating anything. And when we can relax, that's when we can become aligned, that's when deep healing can occur.
Koliko sam shvatio, zvukoterapija na neki način dolazi u paketu sa onim što se na mnogim mjestima u svijetu danas istražuje, a to je nekakva snaga i utjecaj namjere, da ne kažemo čak i neke koherencije srca i drugih stvari. Na koji način se zapravo zvukoterapija ne može odvojiti od takvog pogleda na stvari?
Oh, it's impossible not to incorporate these things to be effective. I think that's the point. I mean, when we come to working with a client, one-to-one with sound therapy, then it's so much more than just the sounds that's involved. I mean, every type of therapy, even when it comes to seeing your general practitioner, your doctor, it involves more than just the prescription of the drug. You know, it involves the interaction between you and the person. And so what's really important, and I think this is what I really want to focus on on this show, is how what we teach is a truly integrated package. It's a truly integrated process that we need to be aware of. Okay, so what I've done is I've looked at every step in the process here and looked at the scientific research and the evidence to show what works and what doesn't in all of this process. Okay, so what we need to look at when we come to one-to-one therapy is what happens before the person arrives. So what does the therapist need to do in order to get themselves into the right kind of state of mind, into the right presence in order to be able to do the therapy work effectively. What happens during the treatment? What happens right at the moment when they say hello and they welcome them into the space? What happens next? How does the therapist interact and connect with the client? All these are really important factors. And then what role do the sounds make? What role do the instruments play in that process? And then what happens at the end of that, the role of silence as part of the sounds? And then what happens when the client even leaves the room and in between the sessions? So how do we engage them in a process that involves them in becoming much more actively responsible for themselves and their lives and their own health and wellness? That's important.
Kad god se priča o zvukoterapiji, neizbježno je spomenuti pojam rezonancije, jer se na neki način pomoću zvukova nastoji ugovoriti ili harmonizirati određene frekvencije tijela. Kakva je uloga te rezonancije kada pričamo o pomaganju ljudima po pitanju zdravlja?
Sure. Okay, well, there are different ways that resonance plays a part, but the fundamental place of resonance when we come to thinking about sound therapy is based on the principle, firstly, that every part of our body, of our physical body, right from a cell through to an organ, such as maybe the liver, through to our whole body, has its own resonant frequency, the frequency at which it vibrates, and at that state of vibration, which is an oscillating state, that it absorbs energy the most easily. So what we are as humans is we're in this constant state of taking energy in various ways. We take it in through the food we eat, we take it in from sunlight, we take it in water and so on. And we're always transforming that energy into calories, into vitamins, into minerals that support life. And so when our cells and every part of our body is operating at its true resonant state, that's when we have health. Okay? And what we can do is that there's now a process of calculating the frequencies of different cells and of different organs. And maybe we could talk more about that a bit later on. But the point is that when perhaps something as a result of an accident or as a result of a toxin or a pathogen, or there's maybe some trauma has occurred in someone's lives, then what happens is that the frequencies, the natural resonant frequency of the cells of the organ, it kind of drops out of phase, essentially, so it drops down. And so what we're doing then with the sounds is we're introducing a similar frequency that has the effect of entraining the frequency of the organ, of the cells, back into its natural state. So if you can imagine, if you take take a liver, for example, I'm just going to do this in a sense a bit pictorially, sound and oscillations have this wave-like form. Okay, so the point of resonance is that if the liver is kind of going like this, whereas it should normally be going like this, and we introduce a sound wave that has this frequency of the liver, then what happens is that gradually they get locked into this phase, they get coupled into this phase, and so we can entrain the liver back into its normal frequency state. And that's what we mean by resonance. So it's this coupling effect of introducing one sound, one frequency that's similar, but and is at the true rate that we want it to be at. And that then entrains the other one back into that state.
Jedna od prvih tema s kojom su se susreli antropolozi kada su došli u neka plemena u zabačenim dijelovima planeta našeg su bili bubnjevi i mnogi poput Mircea Eliade i drugi su razmatrali utjecaj bubnjeva na šamanistički trans i druge stvari. Međutim, suvremena znanstvena istraživanja su na neki način premostila to staro znanje i ono što bismo danas zvali znanost, nekad smo zvali znanjem, s obzirom da nije bilo strukturirano kao danas, i pokazala da ima više od pukog nekog vjerovanja temelja u tome da bubnjevi i ritam nešto rade dobro tijelu. Što i kako? U osnovi, evo, donijeli ste nekakve bubnje, pa možete se i poslužiti nekim najvećim.
Yeah, it's really interesting, you know, this whole thing, because if typically through shamanistic cultures throughout the world, they use drums, they use other instruments, their voice and so on. But if we just stick with the drums, typically you find a rhythm pattern that is very steady. There's not a lot of variation, and it's very repetitive, and it's used throughout the world. And so that was why they did this research to say, well, what was going on when they did this pattern? And it sounds like this. So you've probably heard that kind of thing before. So what's happening there, when it's analysed, is that there's a rhythmic pattern of about typically 4 to 5 beats per second. Okay, and what it's been found, because there's now this type of scientific inquiry that's called psychoacoustics. So they're looking at the effect of the acoustics of the sound on what's happening in our brain. Okay, and so what they found is that after playing that rhythm for a few minutes, usually 5 minutes maybe, sometimes sooner, sometimes a bit longer. But what happens is that although that's quite a fast rhythm, it actually has the effect of entraining. We're talking about this principle of entrainment, of entraining the brainwave frequencies so that the brainwave slows down into this alpha theta zone, typically around about 7 or 8 hertz or cycles per second. And so it has this effect of having a general relaxation throughout the body. And what's really interesting then is that, as also just been shown, is that there's a relationship between that count, that number of cycles per second, and what is being called one of the Schumann resonances. Okay, so I think it was in 1952 that this German physicist, Dr. Schumann, discovered these resonances of the which are in this so-called cavity in the space between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, which is about 85 kilometers up in the atmosphere above us. And in this space, you see what happens is that the solar radiation, it ionizes this part of the atmosphere up there. So it creates this positive charge of that space relative to the Earth's surface, which is more negatively charged. And so in this, it's almost like there's this electrical interaction, excuse me, between the two. And in this space, in this cavity, which is a bit like the cavity in a musical instrument, there's this opportunity for resonance to occur. And this is activated mostly by lightning storms throughout the world. There's usually hundreds of lightning storms happening every second. And that keeps activating this resonant chamber at this number of cycles per second. There are a few others as well, but around about 7.8 to 8.2 is typically, it fluctuates daily and at night and so on, times of the year and all that. But around about 8, let's just hold it at that figure, around about 8 is the frequency. And so this entrainment with the drum, it's entraining the brainwave frequencies down to about 7 or 8 again. So you get this correspondence, therefore, between the brainwave frequencies entrained by the drum, the Schumann resonance, which is this natural occurring life force, you could say, and you then get this synergistic coupling effect, which has further relaxation, further benefits. It has a direct effect on the pineal gland. It affects the nervous system directly. It releases melatonin. It creates the body to relax, to de-stress, and to boost the immune system. So you get this wonderful coupling effect, this wonderful synergistic effect between the drumming, the brainwave, and this natural energy in the atmosphere.
Drugim riječima, ono što se činilo nekakvim narodnim običajem zapravo je nekakav uređaj za prilagođavanje čovjeka frekvencijama koje su inače na zemlji prirodno prisutne, a iz nekog razloga iziđe iz njih povremeno. Koji su inače ljudi se bavili istraživanjem frekvencija na čemu se temelji zvukoterapija? Imamo ih tu barem nekoliko na popisu, ne znam od kojih bi se moglo početi. Možda ovaj čovjek koji se zvao liječnik, James Grimzevski, koji je udario neke temelje toga. U međuvremenu možete bubanj vratiti ako vam smeta.
Yeah, otherwise I might drop it or something. Tako. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he is a man who's a scientist in UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles.
James Grimzevski.
Yeah. Okay. Who he's developed this new form of science, you could say, which is where what he's looking at is he's able to, with what's called atomic force microscope. It's a bit like a highly sensitive microphone. He's able to go down at the cellular level and actually hear the sounds of cells. So what he's finding is that essentially every cell in our body is singing. It comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's the frequency at which it's operating at. And so having been able to then, with this kind of super sensitive microphone, he's then able to record the sounds. And then through the process of a mathematical calculation called Fourier transform, using a series of equations essentially, he's able to then calculate the actual frequency of the different cells and of the different organs and so on. And so it's been found, for example, that the bone cells, the ones that are to do with the growth of bones, that this would typically have this resonant frequency of about 7 hertz, and that what would it be? It would be things to do with the tendons, for example. So the part that's maybe at the back of your ankle here, that would have a resonant frequency of about 10 hertz. And so what's then been done is to then look at, well, what's the correlation, therefore, between these kind of frequencies and practices that therapists, that healers, that we can then incorporate with the sound. So we can get a correlation between the understanding from that kind of research about the frequencies of the body, and then the way we can then use the instruments and our own entrainment process. You see, what's been found, but you mentioned the Institute of Heart Maths, for example, is that it's been found that the heart is 5,000 times more powerful in terms of the effect on the electromagnetic force than our brains. So this is a really powerful force field. And so when you're coming to work with sound therapy, there's a need to really work with that energy as well. And we can talk more about that in a minute. But I just wanted to emphasize that frequencies are important, but it's only part of the equation. It's kind of what we call intention is also a very, very important part, and it's how we can relate to that. In terms of the frequencies, though, that there's been now, because there's been this kind of identification with the role of frequencies, there's been quite a lot of different types of analysis of that, which is very interesting. So a very pictorial way, a graphic way of illustrating that was done by a man called Fabien Maman, who was originally he was a jazz musician, and the little story about him was that he used to travel the world with his band. This was back in the sort of 60s and 70s, playing jazz. He used to play guitar. And he went to play in Tokyo, and normally he had a massage to help him prepare for the gig. And then on this particular occasion, normally it's a beautiful Japanese woman would come into his hotel room and kind of set him up. He's a friend of mine, this guy. And then, but on this occasion, this kind of older guy came into the room, and he went, "Oh, who are you? What are you here for?" He says, "Well, I'm an acupuncturist." And he said, "Oh, okay, so you're going to help me?" So he did this acupuncture treatment on him, and he was going, wow, he felt really fantastic. And so it got him interested in acupuncture, and actually he then spent 7 years training to become an acupuncturist. And then what happened was that when he then qualified, essentially, he was being encouraged by his teacher to set up practice as an acupuncturist. And he said, yeah, but I'm only going to treat musicians. I just want to treat musicians and my friends. And so initially that's all he did. And one day, a friend of his sent his son in who had a very severe bronchitis, so respiratory problem. And in acupuncture, I know about this because I trained as shiatsu and oriental medicine as well. One of the points that you use is this point here on the finger. And if you stick a needle in there, even in an adult, it hurts. It's really sore. And so he thought, this is going to be too painful to put in this child's finger. And he's going to start screaming. Everybody's going to think that, what am I doing here? He's this crazy man. And they're not going to come back anymore. So something intuitively, he introduced him to the idea that what he needed to do was to go over to his piano and pick up his tuning fork, A440, pick it up from the tuning fork, and tapped it, put it on the finger like this, and held it there while it's vibrating. And as a result of that, he then discovered that after a little bit of treatment, that this condition immediately started to improve. And that led him to then explore the role of then sound, frequency, and the world of tuning forks, which we can talk about a bit more. Anyway, so what he did was he then linked up with people in the medical school and the university, and he did this series of experiments. There was two types of experiments where with one type he took healthy tissue, cells of healthy tissue from the human body, put it into plates for the microscope, and then he used Kirlian photography to take photographs, in a sense, of the aura of these cells. And what he found was that by then playing different instruments and different notes and using his voice and so on the healthy cells, that the colours and the shapes of this aura of the cells changed. So that showed him and shows everyone else that there is an effect that we're having in terms of the cell structure, the energy of the cells, through the use of sounds and so on. So that was quite interesting. And then he found that, and again, coming back to what we were talking about in terms of the sympathetic resonance of each cell, that there was particular notes and particular frequencies where the aura seemed most complete and whole and shiny and bright and all of that. And so they would then be the kind of the resonant frequency of those cells that he would find. But what he also did, which is perhaps even more interesting here, is that he then took some cells of a cancerous tumour culture and put it in there. This time he didn't use the Kirlian photography. He just used a simple magnification of that to actually look at what was happening at the cells on this plate. And he again played different instruments, different notes, and took photographs every minute for 21 minutes. And so they had these whole series of photographs for the same cells or from the same culture, but with different effects for different notes and different instruments and so on. And again, he found that with certain instruments, certain notes, that there was an effect happening on these cancerous cells. So in a way, that in itself is enough, because it's showing that we can have an impact on the cancerous cells. Now, he kind of explained in some cases that what happened was that in certain conditions, it was as if the cancerous cells kind of disappeared. He used the word explosion, but I think that's probably too strong. It's almost like they just kind of evaporated. And I don't want to make any false claims here, because, I don't want to say that sound therapy can definitely help cancer. I mean, I've certainly been in situations where there's been this spontaneous remission of cancerous tumours when I've been working with people. And so I kind of have this belief that it is really helpful. But I don't want to make any claims or to give any false promises. But what he found, which was really interesting, is that the instrument, you could say, that had the quickest and the biggest impact on the cells was actually the human voice. Okay, the voice that he was using, singing essentially. And that what he did was he sang a simple scale, like I was doing at the beginning, the do, re, mi, fa, so, and all that. And then he found that after 9 minutes of singing this scale, that these kind of cancerous cells went like that. So that was really interesting.
Dobro, imamo mi još nekoliko zanimljivih istraživanja za predstaviti. U međuvremenu, Malo ćemo pogledati neki prilog, naime nedavno se principe kojima se bavi Antonij Nec može sresti u Hrvatskoj. U sljedećim minutama o tome, a nešto malo više o našem današnjem gostu.
Britanac Antonij Nec učitelj je zvukoterapije s dugogodišnjim iskustvom. Zvukoterapija je metoda koja rabi zvučne vibracije u cilju opuštanja i terapeutskih dobrobiti.
Što više frekvencija, to je važno, što više tonova da je uključeno u terapiju, a kod terapije glasom isto tako se rade određene melodije, nisu toliko razvedene, nisu toliko bogate kao prava muzička forma. Najčešće je vokaliziranje i toniranje na jednom tonu, ali i postoje znači ta intervalika koja uvijek ima svoju funkciju, jer svaki interval, to i glazbenici i muzičari znaju, ima svoju funkciju i nešto nosi u sebi. Vrlo je važno da grupu ljudi dovedemo u teta stanje svijesti, teta stanje valova mozga. Znači da je to jedan spori titraj od 4 do 7 Hz, a on se inače koristi pri nekim terapijama, hipnoterapiji, teta terapiji i tako dalje. To je vrlo slično stanje kao kad idemo u san. To se stanje, dakle, i u drugim terapijama koristi, tako i u zvukoterapiji, za brisanje nekih emocionalnih trauma, za brisanje nekih, znači, poremećaja. Na sve to se obraća zvukoterapija, znači na iscijeljenje od svih tih trauma u tom stanju, znači u teta dubokom stanju svijesti u koje mi dovodimo na određeni način ljude u terapiji. Često puta kasnije vide da su se neke blokade oslobodile, svjedoče o tome, duboko su relaksirani, osjećaju promjene, osjećaju i širenje svijesti.
Antonijeva zaljubljenost u potencijale zvuka počela je još u njegovim tinejdžerskim danima tijekom 1970. godina.
Po prvi puta susreće se sa jednom višom dimenzijom, tako mogla bi reći svetom dimenzijom zvuka, slušajući redovnike katoličke crkve koji pjevaju gregorijanske korale. I to mu se jako svidjelo i nekako poslije toga ga je put nanio u Tibet. Tamo je upoznao budističke redovnike i sa njima pjevajući mantre i meditirajući doživljava proširena stanja svijesti koja opisuje kao stanja savršenog mira, blaženstva i jedinstva sa svim stvorenim.
Ta iskustva potaknula su ga da se intenzivno posveti korijenima zvukoterapije te duhovnim i iscijeliteljskim tradicijama Indije, Tibeta, Kine i Japana. Uvide drevnih kultura o iscijeliteljskim mogućnostima zvuka sagledava u svjetlu suvremenih znanstvenih istraživanja i spoznaja.
1991. on dobiva svoju prvu diplomu iz istočnjačke medicine i shiatsuo i otvara svoju prvu holističku praksu u Danskoj. Tih godina nekako kreće njegov put, znači istraživanja znanosti i umjetnosti, vibracionih terapija, koje ne utječu samo na naše fizičko, nego na sve aspekte našeg bića. I tako njega put vodi do danas, kada se on bavi zvukoterapijom i podučava, on je učitelj. I meni, recimo, što mogu reći da je najupečetljivije kao učitelj, nekako uputio nas je na to da moramo paziti na neke faktore pri terapeutskom radu. To mi se nekako najviše dojmilo i tu nas upozorava i upućuje da je najvažnije da stvorimo povjerenje u odnosu između terapeuta i klijenta. Zatim da je isto tako važno da klijent želi promjenu i da je klijent zadovoljan i da vjeruje u terapiju s kojom se radi.
Od 2010. godine Antonij je ravnatelj instituta Color of Sound, boja zvuka, koji je osnovan 2003.
Institut znači kombinira taj naziv Color of Sound, odnosi se na to što se uči o bojama i o zvuku. Institut kombinira edukaciju zvuka i edukaciju boja. Tako da to je u stvari nešto što je novo, što se tek razvija i u čemu naša budućnost je. To su iscijeljenja, to je terapije biljkama, glazbom, zvukom i bojama, nešto što nas sve više obuzima i sve više prožima. Institut Znači daje edukaciju kroz niz radionica, teleseminara i profesionalnih treninga. Anthony ima studente iz čitavog svijeta, a radionica organizira u Irskoj i Engleskoj. I ovoga ljeta po prvi put nam dolazi na otok Kiž u Hrvatsku sa jednom takvom radionicom koja će trajati 7 dana. Osim zvukoterapije, kromoterapije, on još pridodaje šijacu i on radi znači tu jednu kombinaciju terapija koje najviše rezoniraju sa njim i sa njegovim pacijentima, klijentima to jest. I tako i da nas nekako uvijek upućuje na to da radimo kombinaciju prema našim afinitetima, da nekako uvijek možemo dodati neku dimenziju više.
Stali smo kod niza znanstvenih istraživanja ove materije koja je dugo vremena bila u sferi iskustva, intuicije, više nekakvog opisa doživljaja, ali ona ima naravno i svoju jasnu podlogu. Konkretno, spominjali ste prije Fourierove transformacije. One su dosta poznate, pogotovo kad se radi o transformaciji, ne znam, kod holograma su recimo primijenjeni i slično. Još jedan glazbenik se uključio u analize tih transformacija koje su vezane uz ove naše današnju priču o zvukoterapiji. Ko je on bio i koji je bio njegov doprinos?
Yeah, I mean, one of the earliest pioneers of you could say, sound and music therapy of this type in the States, in the United States, was Stephen Halpern. So, and he actually did a PhD, so he's a doctor, on the role of sounds in relaxation and in therapy like that. And it was him who, what he did was he was one of the pioneers who first put on, put these electrodes on the surface of people's brains, the EEG machines, to track what was happening with the brainwave activity. And he also used Kirlian photography of people's auras, in this case, to look at what was happening with the impact of the sounds of the music. And he was also interested to see what would happen with the projection of people's consciousness as well. And so he was able to do a series of experiments where he, with consciousness on its own, he was able to see an effect in terms of the brainwave activity, in terms of the effect on the aura, and also in terms of the sounds, he was able to see an effect. And so what he then did was to put the two together, with the consciousness, with the intent, you could say, and with the sounds. And that's when he saw the most dramatic effect. And so he was the person who basically realized, and he used the term, he said that sounds are the carrier of consciousness. So he started off this process of research and experimentation, whereby people have now realized that by setting the appropriate intent, and there's a whole lot of factors in there that we could look at, involving thought, involving imagery, involving feeling, and so on, involving a heart, electromagnetic field, a whole variety of factors, that if we call that consciousness, conscious intent, then the sound waves, in a sense, amplify those, and they carry that to the other person. And so, as a result of that, another musician and sound healer, sound therapist is Jonathan Goldman. Both of these people have produced many CDs that people can buy easily and get hold of, quite a few books between them. And he coined the term, which I think is really great. He just said it's frequency plus intention, that equals the healing. Okay, and that summarizes it beautifully.
Prije ste spominjali eksperimente sa stanicama raka. Nije on je čovjek bio jedini koji se time bavio. Leonard Laslov je liječnik koji je također istraživao utjecaj raznih tipova namjere na stanice raka. Kakvi su bili njegovi učinci i rezultati slični? On ima nešto drugačiji.
Well, it was a whole different other way of producing the experiments. I mean, and I was completely blown away by this. Okay, so this is a medical doctor. He'd spent years working in the medical profession, both and doing surgery and so on. He was involved with women's health, with gynecology and so on. But he also opened up to this concept of working in a different way, complementary way. And what he wanted to do was to find a way of doing an experiment that ruled out the so-called placebo effect, the effect where, you take a sugar pill, for example, and then you get better. So he designed this experiment with another scientist called Glenn Ryan, who was running something at the time called the Quantum Biology Research Center in Palo Alto in California, where they had very highly sophisticated biomedical equipment. And they designed these series of experiments that were really interesting and very kind of scientifically well designed. So what he did was he had, they got 3 Petri dishes and put in again these cells from a cancerous tumour into these 3 different Petri dishes. There was another 3 Petri dishes there, same cells put in, or from the same tumour anyway. And then these were all taken away, they were all mixed together, so there was this kind of randomization and double blinding happening. And 3 dishes went out to a different room where there was a non-healer sitting over there reading a book. So basically not involved, not doing anything, but they were there. And then these 3 Petri dishes were brought back into the room where Laszlo was, this medical doctor. And he then did this process of working with his intention, with his state, his energy state, to see what effect would have on the rate of growth of these cells. And they did a whole set of process to basically track that at the DNA level to see what was happening with the rate of cell growth. And so this was a great setup, control group, randomization, so on. And then after 24 hours, they looked at what had happened in relation to the control group and this study group. And what was particularly interesting was that they were looking at what did he need to do in order to have an effect, if any, but also they were looking at the content of his intention, the content of his consciousness. So they were trying to see whether it would be more effective to kind of have an intention or have a consciousness of a certain type as opposed to another. And they were looking to see if there's any difference there. And it was fascinating what they found. And for me, this was great because what he did was he found, and this was also backing up research that had taken place back in the 1980s, produced by another German author called Beck, where he'd studied a whole series of healers, traditional healers from different shamanistic cultures throughout the world, and found that in the moments when they were most effective in their healing, they were in this kind of slightly altered state of consciousness, which was basically this alpha-theta state that we were talking about earlier. And so he then was able to enter into that state at the start of this experiment. He then set up what he called a state of what he called unconditional love, a state of loving kindness and compassion that you could say the Dalai Lama, for example, would kind of contain and emanate. But then into that, he then introduced different types of intent. So just keeping it simple, because there was 5 different types that they looked at. One was to see whether just holding that general intent of unconditional love from your heart, what effect that would have. Another one was to look at if the intention was for the cells to return to their normal state of health, what effect would that have? And another one was for the cells to kind of use a kind of like an energy exchange. Another one was to imagine them disappearing. So cutting to the chase, what happened was that he found that the combination of visualizing that the cells reduced and this particular intention of reducing to their normal state, that had a 40% reduction in the rate of growth. The next one to it had a 20% reduction. If you just had the thought...
To je znači, riječ je zapravo o namjeri i misli. Međutim, kada bismo povezali to se iz utjecaja frekvencija na staničnom nivou, o čemu smo također pričali prije 20 minuta, tu bismo mogli spomenuti biokemičara koji se zove James Oshman, ako sam dobro zapamtio. Ko je bio njegov, znači da se malo vratimo na zvuk i frekvencije, doprinos istraživanju zvukoterapije?
Yeah, okay. So he was looking at, essentially, he's another biologist, essentially. So he was looking at what is it, how do we actually trigger healing, essentially, inside the body? What is it, what can we do to do that? And so what he found, cutting to the, keeping it really simple, was that at certain... he was looking at this is actually drawing on the research that had already been done in China with actually it was started off by the Beijing National Acoustics Laboratory, where what they did was that they looked at the the frequencies essentially that were coming out of the hands of these Qigong masters who were involved in healing. And they found that, yes, there was a broad range of frequencies there. They called them secondary sounds, essentially. But they found that there was a range of frequencies coming out of them that were in this extra low frequency zone, typically 4 to 10 hertz. And so he was looking at what was the range, what would be the impact of these kind of frequencies on certain types of healing processes. And what he found through all of his research and development simply was that it seems as if these low frequencies have this effect of kickstarting the healing process, of activating it. There's this window of opportunity at that frequency range that can activate that healing potential.
Problem je što živimo u dosta bučnom svijetu. Zbog toga je posebno dojmljiva jedan pokušaj da se doista čuje svoje tijelo. Naravno, za to je bilo potrebno, ako sam dobro shvatio, provesti dosta stotina sati u gluhoj komori. Tko je to napravio, kad i kako nas je to onda dovelo do ovih svih alata koje vidimo pred sobom?
Yeah, okay, that's really good. Yeah, okay, so John Bellieu was is another American musician, and when he was at at music college, he was introduced to this idea of this so-called anechoic chamber, where this is a soundproof room where you go into this room, you can't hear anything from outside, and nothing from inside goes out either. And he found this fascinating, and he spent 500 hours inside this chamber. And after nearly close to that time, he suddenly started to hear this noise. And he wondered where it came from. And he realized that this noise that he was hearing, this sound that he was hearing, was the sound of his nervous system. And that was interesting in itself. But being a musician, he then thought, what could I do to affect that simply and easily? And again, he took in a tuning fork, and he started to play this tuning fork around his body like this, placing it in different places. And he found that, again, in this anechoic chamber, that the sound changed. So he realized that frequencies, tuning forks, have an effect on our nervous system, have an effect on the sound of our nervous system, and have an effect on our health and wellness. And as a result, he's spent many years now, 20, 30 years, he's right at the forefront, in fact, written quite a few books on human tuning, using tuning forks as a way to be quite precise.
Zanimljivo je što su te zvučne vilice možda jedan od najpreciznijih alata za zvukoterapiju koje sam do sad vidio. Ostali daju zvukove koji su tako šireg spektra. Na koji način su one ugođene? Kako su podijeljeni ti stupnjevi frekvencija i zbog čega su tako baš posložene, a ne nekako drugačije?
Yeah, okay. I mean, the range, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're very specific. They are tuned to a particular frequency. So the range we have here, for example, is that this is a 32 hertz one. It's got these weights on the end, which means that it's particularly strong. And all of these forks have a particular benefit. So this one is particularly good for the lymphatic system, for example. So that's a 32. One of the highest ones here is a 4096, and this is typically used in conjunction with crystals. So we can create a whole. This is a quartz crystal. So that's quite a big range. Now, if you're thinking about a piano, typically the lowest note on a piano is about 27 hertz. So this is close to the lowest end. And the highest note on a piano, which is a C, the high C there, is about 4,100. So what we've got here, essentially, in tuning forks, is the ability to cover the whole range, essentially, on a piano, which is quite interesting, and be very precise with that as well.
Zanimljivo je vidjeti kako kvarc pojačava zapravo zvuk vilice.
Yeah.
Možete li nam demonstrirati?
Yeah. I mean, so if we just play the fork on its own, like that, I mean, it's still quite strong and powerful, but of course the quartz does amplify it tremendously. So it creates a much sweeter sound, but also richer overtones. And I think that, and then we can work with the quality of the quartz itself and the quality of the sound together to create this vibrational field that is very healing. So that's really good. I think that introduces the idea of how we can use the sound itself to as a form of diagnosis.
To je zapravo ključno pitanje. Potpuno je jasno da stanice, organi i svi dijelovi našeg tijela imaju određene frekvencije. Potpuno je jasno da se te frekvencije mogu stvoriti i dovesti u rezonanciju. I sad kreće najveće pitanje. Na koji način točno znati koja frekvencija je, da tako kažemo, raštimana ili je potrebna nekom čovjeku. I zanimljivo je da se to također opet može dobiti kroz zvuk, s obzirom da ljudsko tijelo također emanira zvuk koji se može očitati. Kako to funkcionira?
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, just as with any kind of therapy, we take a client history record. They talk about their symptoms, their conditions, and then that gives us information, and we can act on that. So we know, just as I said before, if there's a problem with the lymph system, we can use this fork, for example. If there's a problem with stress, we can use another fork, and so on. But we can also use instruments like this Balinese bell, or it could be any instrument really, but this is a particularly effective one because this has a lovely range of rich overtones that are created at quite high frequencies. And simply just by playing this bell and placing it in this kind of zone just above the body, what happens is that, you can't really hear it just now, but what happens is that the quality of the cells that are singing, like we talked about earlier, is reflected in the overtone structure of the bell. And so by listening to the changes in the overtones, we can then detect where there's maybe a depletion of energy, the overtones drop away, the pitch drops down. Sometimes the sound almost like disappears completely, it's cut out. And in other places where there's too much energy, where there's an excess, it starts to fizz, it starts to get a much higher note. And so what we're finding is that by working with sounds, is that it's got this two-way process. We can use the sounds and the frequencies to influence and raise the cells, and at the same time we can get this information back from the body through the sounds themselves. And so this is, in the moment, we're getting this instant kind of replay almost, this instant information which tells us what to do next, which instrument to go to next.
Drugim riječima možemo čuti dijagnozu. Ukratko, koji su instrumenti kod zvukoterapije najčešći? Zvučne vilice su nekako najpreciznije, najznanstvenije, da tako izmjerim. Neke su više tradicionalne, već smo vidjeli bubanj, zvučne zdjele. Što vi koristite konkretno kada se radi o liječenju i pomaganju ljudima?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a range. I mean, and some of these are now quite commonly known. We have the Tibetan bowl, there's the gongs. This is an example of a quartz crystal bowl. So again, it's using the crystalline energy, and some of these are infused with crystals as well and with color. So there's a relationship with the color spectrum there as well that we can work with. So typically the therapy would involve a process whereby these more general instruments are used as a way to help relax. What happens is that as the body relaxes, there's all of this kind of entrainment happening, there's the relaxation responses kicked in, and then we can then work with the more specific instruments in this kind of middle of the zone, maybe the tuning forks at that point. And then we can come out of that. We might then use the drum, we might use some of these other rhythm and grounding instruments. And then also we have what we call harmony balls, which are these kind of lovely little shakers that create the bridges between some of these more dynamic instruments and you know, in the process. And then maybe at the end, and this is very important, is that there's a period of silence, so that it's in that silence that there's a whole integration of the frequencies and the sounds, and that's when the real alignment can happen and the real healing occurs.
Možete li još malo proširiti, spomenuli ste istraživanje na Qigong majstorima u Kini, na nekih 1000 pacijenata i mjerenje toga što im doista izlazi iz ruku, znači nekakve ekstra niske frekvencije, do 10 Hz. Kakav su učinak one imale na tijelo i kakva su terapiju na temelju toga ljudi kasnije u Kini uspjeli nekako sustavno sustavizirati?
Yeah, okay, so a study was done in a hospital in Beijing of, I think it was 1,100 patients. Using this knowledge about the low frequencies there, and what they designed was a simple device basically that was used in the hospital to mimic, to simulate those frequencies. So it's like scanning up and down in those frequencies. And they found a whole range of health benefits. They found things like reduction in pain, so either before and after operations, so that's really significant in hospitals. They found a reduction in headaches as a specific type of pain. They found that there was a speedier, a faster recovery of wounds. And they also found that there was like a lifting of depression, so there was kind of like an emotional and psychological benefits as well.
Dobro, kada dođete na Iš, ako sam dobro shvatio, od 30. kolovoza do 6. rujna, ponijet ove stvari sa sobom. Gdje i kad ljudi mogu naći još informacija o vama i o vašem dolasku u Hrvatsku krajem ljeta?
Sure. Well, I mean, we have a website, so maybe it's www.colorofsound.org, and you're welcome to go there. There's a page there about this seminar on IJ from the end of August, really the first week in September. And it's a lovely place, and I'll be there with Ivana, who I think you saw earlier, and so she's this wonderful teacher and practitioner of sound therapy here in Croatia, and we'll be there together. She can interpret what I'm saying if people's English is not so great. But it's a great opportunity to learn how to work with all of these instruments and how to be effective in sound therapy, how to integrate it into an existing practice that you might have, maybe as a massage, for example, or also just to work with your friends and family and that kind of thing as well.
Te metode naravno se mogu koristiti za uljepšavanje života, a isto tako, o čemu sad nemamo više vremena razgovarati, za neke malo drastičnija izmijenjena stanja, poremećena zdravlja, s obzirom da se vrlo često neočekivani i zapravo neočekivano brzi efekti pojavljuju kada se uključuju frekvencije, kada tijelo počne razgovarati s frekvencijama na ono što neki čovjek koji zna što treba pružiti može pružiti. U svakom slučaju želim vam ugodno ljeto u Hrvatskoj, koliko god da ono trajalo, i do neke sljedeće prilike, doviđenja.
Thank you very much.
Nema ničeg prirodnog i logičnog od razumijevanja frekvencija njihovog međusobnog utjecaja, pogotovo kad dođe do usklađivanja koherencije, to jest pak rezonancije. Ako ljudsko tijelo promatramo kao skup frekvencija, prije ili kasnije nametnut će se ideja da je moguće ugađanjem tih frekvencija na neki način pomagati održavanju ravnoteže psihe, duha, tijela, ukupno rečeno onog što zovemo zdravlje. I zvukoterapija se tako otkriva kao jedna mješavina zapravo i znanosti, i kreativnosti, umjetnosti, pa čuli smo čak i srca, koji se međusobno svi nadopunjuju umjesto da se, kao što to često biva u današnjem svijetu, isključuju. A kad smo već kod isključivanja, stigao je i taj trenutak. Trenutak za laku noć.